Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Justice D.Y. Chandrachud's tenure is coming to an end. It's an unusual tenure. First of all, because it's a long tenure. 2 years for a CJI is a very long tenure. If you go over the list of Indian CJIs, I'll have the list run on your screen. Please see how few have had a tenure like this. That's because people become CJI too late, and then there is an age limit of 65. Unlike, say, the secretaries to the Government of India or chiefs of our armed forces, there's no tenure. That once you get the job, you get 2 years or 3 years. It's not like that. That's why many of our CJs have very short terms. So it just becomes a formality. We've had a CJ, for example, who served just 17 days. That was Justice Kamal Narayan Singh in 1991, 17 days. Another one got about twice as many, 35 days. That is Justice J.C. Shah in 1970. And then Justice Rajendra Babu, 29 days. That is more recent. He's also somebody who gave us some interesting judgments, including the judgment that effectively stopped privatization in the Atal Bihari Vajpayee era. Because Atal Bihari Vajpayee government was privatizing PSUs at a very fast pace as a major reform. It was Justice Rajendra Babu's judgment that said that a PSU cannot be privatized until in each case you pass it through Parliament. Because of the reasoning that public money was involved. That killed privatization, and frankly, since then, no privatization has taken place except Air India. So if you ask me, that was one of the... He didn't do it while he was CJ for just a very short while, just 29 days. I'm just telling you that mostly CJs have had short tenures in India because it comes by seniority. And when somebody gets a reasonable tenure, then expectations from that CJ are very high. That was the case with D.Y. Chandrachud as well. In fact, his successor now, Justice Sanjeev Khanna, again an accomplished judge, accomplished, highly reputed judge, he will also have a tenure of just 6 months. A long tenure judge is a rarity in India. That's why there is so much debate looking at the time that he has had as the CJI, the orders that have been given or that have not been given, and he has annoyed many with his orders. He's also pleased many with orders because, to be a judge is very tough because a judge, there are 3 kinds of judges. One, that give what they see as the right kind of order, looking at the law and the facts. So with the best of intentions, you can always err. That is human. A judge is not God, right? But sincerely reading the law, reading the constitution, looking at the evidence, looking at the arguments, arrive at what looks like a reasonable conclusion. That's one kind of judges. The other kind of judges might be motivated, might come under pressure, might be ideological. We've seen many like that in the past. That is the second kind of judge. Then there is a third kind of judge. Unfortunately, we've had too many of them over the last 30-40 years. These are judges who take no decision because they think, I have a short tenure, right? I can just kick this can down the road. If you see this electoral bonds case, for example, that can was being kicked down the road for almost 7 years until this was settled now under D.Y. Chandrachud. So there are 3 kinds of judges. Which kind was he? History will decide, because judicial orders, the judge's record, that is subject to a lot of research and a lot of debate, and that goes on for a long time. To that extent, I would say that Justice Chandrachud was a consequential judge. You can agree with what he did, you can disagree with what he did. He functioned in very polarized times, so anything you would say would annoy somebody, maybe please somebody also, but it was a tough place to be in, and that's how he's ended his tenure. So to summarize his tenure and to give our view, that we write a 50-word edit, because the idea is that if an editorial is a media institution's opinion, that opinion should be stated in as much space as, say, the maximum length of a tweet, which is 280 characters, which is about 50 words. And that's why we came up with the idea, maybe a nutty idea, of a 50-word edit. What's the point of writing 500 word edits that many newspapers write? Ye dil divana hai, dil to divana dil hai, ye dil divana. Remember that song, Dharmendra and Sadhna? Why be repetitive? You can just say it straight. So we wrote a 50-word edit, which edit itself became quite polarizing because we found some people responding in favor, but a lot of people responding in criticism also. What we do on the print is, when we see criticism, particularly healthy criticism, healthy means non-abusive criticism, healthy is a very loaded term, non-abusive criticism, if we spot it, we tend to reshare it from our handles. So some of what you will see now, we would have reshared from our handles. So what is the 50-word edit that we wrote? Please see it on your screens. We said, if a CJI ends his long tenure annoying both sides, it's a job well done. DY Chandrachud's job was tougher given today's polarized environment. Electoral bonds was his legacy defining order. He also drew criticism from one side of the polarized divide, on his Article 370 order and his Ayodhya order. A please all CJI will be the worst, DYC wasn't that. Now this itself has caused a lot of people to be upset, and many people have said he did not do this, he did not do that, or that he took a cop-out on this. And also there is criticism of many of his judgments. For example, the order on 370, the order of not giving an order to restore statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, leaving it for the government later, just because the government gave an assurance that they will restore the statehood at some point of time. The order which he also signed as one of the judges, not the CJI then, on the Judge Loya death, and many of the others, including the action on Hindenburg, because one side would have expected him to take a very different view on Hindenburg. When I talk of all this, when I speak about all this, I am not on any side. This is cut the clutter, and when we give opinion on cut the clutter, we specify it. The opinion that we have as an organization, I have read out to you in this 50-word edit. Now, he also drew criticism towards his last few weeks. One, because he said that he prayed to God for inspiration or for strength before writing his Ayodhya/Babri Masjid judgment. So it draws immediate criticism, and it's a reasonable criticism. It doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not, but it's a reasonable criticism that a judge should not be invoking God, any God, irrespective of what the judge's religion is, while taking a decision, and that too on an important matter, such an important matter, which should be, the logic should be only rooted in the Constitution, not in any divine inspiration. That's one. However, I would like to also point out that most human beings, when they go out to do something really difficult or challenging in life, they do pray to somebody, because they do need. Soldiers going into battle pray, politicians going into elections pray, and also in parliament. I will give you two examples, one in parliament, one not in parliament, but using the same religious invocation. Dr. Manmohan Singh, while participating in the debate on the nuclear deal, he quoted from Guru Gobind Singh. Guru Gobind Singh's verse on goddess Chandi invoking Lord Shiva before going into battle with the demons, right? And that is, Dehe Shiva Varmoye He Shubh Karmante Kabho Na Taro Variso Jab Jaye Laro Nischay Kar Apni Jeet Karo. Now, that is exactly the verse that Prime Minister Modi also used when he announced that he was withdrawing the farm laws. That was on a Gurpurab, on a big Gurpurab. He came on national TV and he used the same invocation from Guru Gobind Singh and withdrew the farm law. So this is not anything that is unique. However, for a judge to say this, particularly in a case which involved the contentions of people of two different faiths, it can be subject to criticism, and so it drew criticism. You might ask me, how do I remember these lines? I was brought up at least partly in Punjab, and also at least for some time, when I went to school in Bhatinda, this was my school prayer as well. Of course, then it was set to martial music. Now, the second thing that drew criticism, this is all immediate. This is over the last couple of weeks. This does not pertain to his legacy of judicial orders. Those we'll talk about in some detail as we go along. The second was his inviting the Prime Minister to his home for his Ganesh Puja. Now, it's quite common for prime ministers, judges to meet. People have held various kinds of religious festivals, including iftars, for example. Prime Minister of India, until Mr. Vajpayee, used to hold an annual iftar, something that Prime Minister Narendra Modi stopped, right? So, public figures holding religious events at which everybody would come, including judges, is a well-known thing. However, in this case, the criticism came because this was not a public event and Prime Minister Modi was invited. In a conversation with Lok Satta editor Girish Kuber, my former colleague in the Indian Express Group, where he said, I want to tell you that in the states there is a tradition where the Chief Justice of the state and the Chief Minister, they meet often. And he said, first time the Chief Justice, when he is sworn in, goes to meet the CM. Next time the CM comes to the High Court Chief Justice's house. So administratively, socially, meaning people does not mean you get compromised, he said. And I'm quoting from this conversation with Girish Kuber. Now, what do people think? Why do they do meet? You never meet for a decision. That means a judicial decision. And the maturity of our political system lies in the fact that there is a great deal of deference to the judiciary, even in the political class. Now, this is an interesting debate on how much of a social life can serving judges have. So I will also share with you an article from Organizer. Organizer is a publication very close to the RSS. We can't call it the RSS's mouthpiece, but very close to the RSS. One of its former editors, Seshadri Chari, also is a columnist with us. In this article, Justice Swaminathan tells you that there is a tradition of judges, chief justices, particularly in the states, actually being in touch, not just being in touch, but having long conversations with their chief ministers. And he gives the example of such eminent judges as PB Gajendra Gadkar of the past and Mohammad Karim Chagla, even meetings over lunch, etc. with Morarji Desai. What Morarji Desai fed them over lunch, I don't know. And for heaven's sake, I'm making no reference to the beverages that might be served. We knew that Morarji Desai was a very strong believer in prohibition. In fact, he enforced prohibition in Bombay. What was Bombay then? That said, we can now get away from the immediate controversies and look at Justice Chandrachud's judicial record. Because after all, Justice Chandrachud has been a judge of the Supreme Court for more than 8 years, of which 2 years, almost exactly 2 years, have been as Chief Justice of India. Now, he made many orders. Now, you see, you can either give him credit for what the Supreme Court might have done under his overall charge, or you can only talk about the judgments that he delivered. Now, many of the areas, for example, cases against journalists, activists, politicians, UAPA, PMLA, laws where bail is very difficult. Now, there, a lot of nudges have been given by Supreme Court, not by Justice Chandrachud's benches, but by other benches while he's been CJI, that have now led to the release of many of these detainees, including Arvind Kejriwal, Manish Sisodia, etc., for example, because the principle of bail being the rule and jail being an exception has now been repeated in these cases as well. Justice Gawai did that in many of these cases, but the overall charge of the Supreme Court was with Justice Chandrachud. So just as he's also blamed for the many things that the court did not do, for example, bail being denied to Umar Khalid, Sharjeel Imam, many others in the post-Shaheen Bagh protests, he's blamed for that as well. So if that is the case, he also should get some credit for the fact that after a long time, the Supreme Court began pushing at the state in these cases on the application of these laws. That said, look at some of his specific orders. 2020, there was an order allowing women permanent commission in the army, good reformist order. 2021, abortion allowed to unmarried women. 2017, I'm going backwards now, the Puttaswamy case, right to privacy being declared a fundamental right. In the Aadhaar case, he was not the CJI then. In the Aadhaar case, he was the lone dissenting voice. So many of his critics now on the liberal side, I suspect, might have hailed him as the brave dissenter at that point. Because dissent is also an important element in any judicial practice. In fact, Justice H.R. Khanna, when he dissented in that famous or infamous ADM Jabalpur case in 1976 during the emergency, which said that during the emergency, nobody has any fundamental right. He dissented in that. He had then quoted, to make his point, from a dissenting American judge, US Supreme Court judge, who, justifying his dissent in a case, the judge was Charles Evans Hughes. He had said, and I quote from Justice Charles Evans Hughes, as quoted by Justice H.R. Khanna, whose nephew, by the way, will now be our next Chief Justice of India. And I quote from him, a dissent in a court of last resort is an appeal to the brooding spirit of the law, to the intelligence of a future day, जब सबको अकल आ जाएगी. So he was the dissenter in the Aadhaar judgment. Editorially, I was a supporter of Aadhaar and continue to be so, as was ThePrint. And I think we got a fair bit of criticism from the liberal side on that as well, and some of that persists. Hadia case. Hadia was the woman in Kerala who converted to Islam, married a man of her choice. That case came to Supreme Court. A liberal judgment was given. Justice Chandrachud was involved there. That annoyed the other side, the conservative side. Then Judge Loya case. Judge Loya, did he die a natural death or was he killed? This was a unanimous judgment of the Supreme Court. Justice Chandrachud was a part of that. He drew criticism and continues to draw criticism from the left or liberal or the Modi critic side over that. Then the status of Delhi. He gave an order on the status of Delhi, saying that Delhi Lieutenant Governor cannot take administrative decisions unless advised to do so by the Delhi Chief Minister. And he said, while there may be other union territories, but Delhi's case is sui generis. When I say he, I mean the bench that he headed. However, that judgment was never put into effect, but because the government then went ahead and amended the constitution sort of radically, so that judgment became non-operational. Now a challenge to that constitutional amendment is pending in the Supreme Court. Bhima Koregaon case, 3-judge bench. Once again, this was a bench of Justices Deepak Mishra, A.M. Khanwilkar and D.Y. Chandrachud. 2-1, the justice upheld the government's case, but Justice Chandrachud had dissented. So once again, a dissent is an appeal to better wisdom on a future day. And I think we are getting somewhere there on these detentions. Then Navtej Johar versus Union of India. That was the case that held Section 377 of IPC unconstitutional, which means homosexual sex was then legalized or decriminalized. Once again, a liberal judgment on personal liberties, Joseph Shine versus Union of India. This decriminalized the practice of adultery. Until then, we followed the Victorian era law saying that adultery is a crime. Then the Sabrimala order, where it said women between the age of 10 to 50 who were earlier forbidden from visiting Sabrimala because they could be menstruating and that was supposed to be impure, etc., etc. This judgment said that this is wrong, this is unconstitutional, this goes against the right of equality, etc., etc. However, a footnote to that judgment must be added. The footnote is, while the judgment was given, no government, not even a left government, the left front government in Kerala, left has ruled Kerala since then, even they've not been able to implement that judgment. And Congress party initially, Rahul Gandhi had supported this, but Congress party also pulled back very quickly, saying that might have been personal opinion because nobody wants to mess with religion and religious practices. But the order is there, and you can be sure that for that order, he got quite a bit of brickbats from the conservative side. Again, one of his troublesome orders, because these are orders where he did something, this looked like willing to wound but afraid to strike. That was the Maharashtra government order. The installation of the Shinde government in Maharashtra in place of Uddhav Thackeray's, that is through defections. So his judgment did rule that Bhagat Singh Koshyari, the governor, erred in calling for a trust vote. But it also said that he was right to invite Shinde to be sworn in because Thackeray had already resigned. Now that is something that is debatable, will always remain debatable. I do think, in my view, that the logical conclusion to that judgment that Koshyari erred should have been to restore the Thackeray government at that point. Then 2023 again, a 5-judge bench gave a 3-2 order. He was in majority, allowing non-heterosexual couples to have civil rights. 2023 again, his order on Article 370. You will expect him to get criticism again from one side, but support from the other. He upheld the constitutional changes, saying that Jammu and Kashmir did not constitutionally have the right to have a special status because Article 370 had created an asymmetric federalism. He also ordered, as in his bench, also ordered that center must hold elections in Jammu and Kashmir by September, which was pretty much done and government committed to doing it. Third thing on which it took a cop-out was whether to restore the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir, because to that was linked the larger question on whether the central government or national parliament can reduce any state into a union territory. That can was kicked down the road for sure. In fact, he only went by the centre's assurance that in the course of time, they will restore Jammu and Kashmir's statehood. As we know, the new Jammu and Kashmir government has already the cabinet has demanded that statehood should be restored. When that happens, how that happens, we don't know, because the centre did not make any time-bound commitment and the court did not seek one. Then his legacy-defining judgment, as I told you, electoral bonds. Several CJs before that had found one excuse or the other to delay, to postpone it. Somebody said it's too close to an election, then you forgot about it. Then you said again it's too close to an election, then you forgot about it. Then some judge retired, then you forgot about it. But finally, he gave you an order, and it was a stellar order because that left no room for any doubt. Even for the government now, even for the government with the majority that it had then, for them to go to parliament then and to change the laws, etc., would have been very tough and very challenging, because many of the amendments to many laws there, to Income Tax Act, to Companies Act, etc., they had all been carried out through a finance bill. And to do all of that would have been very difficult, in fact, impossible now. And that was then a stellar judgment. After that, there was a pushback from the government. There was a pushback even from State Bank of India, for heaven's sake, but he held his nerve, and electoral bonds are now history. Of course, again, there is criticism that there was a request that he should set up a special investigative team to find out if there was a quid pro quo, etc. But when those things happen, then we say courts are getting into governance. So the courts also know their limit. One more case that is settled towards his last months. That was long delayed case. That was a case coming in from P.V. Narasimha Rao's times on whether a lawmaker is immune from bribery charges. That judgment was given. It was a 7-judge bench, unanimous order saying that a lawmaker has no immunity from bribery charge. So this is generally the judicial track record. Now, there are dozens of other judgments. The order allowing states to impose taxes on minerals or to regulate industrial alcohol, etc. There are many of these, so I'm not going into everything. This is not a definitive inventory. For that, I think you will have to read law books, etc. I've only listed some that will remain consequential for a long time and that have drawn both praise and criticism. That's the reason I said very early on that a judge which pleases both sides will be a very boring judge, and DY Chandrachud wasn't that. Otherwise, we would not be dedicating a full cut the clutter to an outgoing Chief Justice of India.